Contra, a fan novelization. Like the video and subscribe for more video game novelizations such as this. Chapter 8. Bill and Lance moved through the base with brutal efficiency, their boots thudding against the metal floors as they pressed forward. The cold, sterile corridors were filled with the acrid stench of scorched metal and burnt flesh, the aftermath of their relentless assault. Lance was no longer his usual cocky, devil-may-care self. His movements were sharper, his aim deadlier. He fired with an intensity that hadn't been there before, each pull of the trigger laced with an edge of desperation. Bill noticed. "You're pushing too hard," he warned, firing off a burst of laser rounds that tore through a group of enemy soldiers down the hall. "You're going to burn yourself out." Lance barely spared him a glance as he slammed a fresh clip into his rifle. "Maybe I'd rather burn them out first." They rounded a corner and came face to face with another wave of Red Falcon soldiers. The enemy opened fire, but Bill and Lance were faster. A well-placed shot from Bill's rifle sent an enemy reeling, while Lance rushed forward, ducking under incoming fire and cutting down the rest in a ruthless display of marksmanship. Bill took cover behind a metal crate, his mind racing. Lance was unraveling, and it wasn't just adrenaline. The encounter with the alien creature had rattled him. He had seen battle-hardened soldiers lose it before, but never Lance. They reached a weapon storage area, rows of crates stacked high along the walls. Bill pried one open and grunted in surprise. "Attachments," he muttered, holding up a sleek, unfamiliar rifle modification bearing the Red Falcon insignia. Lance grabbed one and immediately snapped it onto his weapon. "Let's see what this one does." He pulled the trigger, and a blast of fire erupted from the muzzle, igniting the walls ahead in a wave of searing heat. He let out a short, humorless laugh. "Yeah. This'll do." Bill picked up another attachment, locking it onto his own rifle. A test shot revealed a spread shot of bullets that cut through everything in their path. He gave a sharp nod. They exchanged a glance. No words needed. Weapons primed, they pushed forward. The next wave of enemies didn't stand a chance. The reinforced steel door groaned under the force of Lance's fire blast, its edges glowing red-hot before crumpling inward. A sudden rush of freezing wind howled through the opening, slamming into them with the force of a freight train. Bill instinctively raised an arm to shield his face as the bitter cold cut through his gear like a knife. Snowflakes swirled chaotically, carried by violent gusts, reducing visibility to near zero. The world beyond the doorway was an expanse of white, a blizzard raging with unnatural ferocity. Lance took a cautious step forward, his boots crunching against the freshly packed snow. He let out a low whistle. How the hell does a jungle base lead straight into this? Bill didn't answer immediately. He stepped out after Lance, his breath already forming thick clouds in the freezing air. He swept his gaze across the tundra, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. It wasn't just a sudden shift in weather, it was wrong. "This isn't natural," Bill muttered, kneeling to scoop up a handful of snow. It was dense, almost crystalline. Not like any snowfall he'd seen before. He let it slip through his fingers and stood up, scanning the horizon. Lance rubbed his arms, his usual bravado giving way to discomfort. "Yeah, well, not natural seems to be the theme of the day." He exhaled sharply. "What's the move?" Bill took a step forward, his eyes narrowing. Through the thick curtain of snow, he could just barely make out the silhouette of a structure in the distance, tall, metallic, and humming with an eerie energy. "There," he said, pointing. "That's our next target." Lance sighed. Figures it wouldn't be a cozy cabin with a fireplace. Bill pressed forward through the relentless storm, each step sinking into the thick, unnatural snow. The blizzard howled around them, the wind carrying flurries that lashed against his face like shards of ice. His fingers tightened around his rifle, its barrel coated in a thin layer of frost. Lance moved ahead, his movement steady, controlled. His earlier unease had faded, replaced by the aggressive confidence Bill was more accustomed to. He fired without hesitation at the red Falcon soldiers emerging through the white haze, his spread shots carving through them like a hot blade through ice. Bill followed suit, taking down targets with precise bursts of gunfire, but his focus was divided. He kept his eye on Lance, observing him between shots. The fear from before, the raw, unfiltered panic, seemed buried now. Whether Lance had truly shaken it off or was just suppressing it, Bill couldn't tell. Either way, he was back to himself, and that was enough. As they advanced, the snow beneath them crunched in an unnatural way, like shattered glass. Bill had been in cold environments before, but this wasn't right. It felt engineered, artificial. And then there was the bigger question gnawing at the back of his mind, the thing he didn't want to think about. The alien. He had seen its massive, grotesque form, its unnatural movements, the way it had fired energy that defied all logic. It wasn't just an advanced enemy weapon, it was alive. He forced the thought away, shaking it from his mind. Focus on the mission. Focus on the now. Another group of red Falcon soldiers emerged from the white void, their armor caked in frost. Lance didn't hesitate, he was already in motion, strafing as he fired, dropping them with bursts of burning projectiles. Bill exhaled. He didn't realize he had been holding his breath. Lance was acting normal again. It was a good sign. Even if nothing else about this mission felt normal anymore. Bill and Lance pressed through the storm, the next base looming ahead through the swirling snow. Its towering metal walls were coated in frost, its turrets inactive for now. They didn't expect that to last. The howling winds carried a low, mechanical hum, a noise that sent a shiver down Bill's spine, and not from the cold. Lance turned his head toward the sky. What the hell is that? Bill followed his gaze. Above them, slicing through the blizzard, a massive machine hovered in eerie silence. It was round, its metallic surface smooth yet bristling with energy. Its body spun slowly, producing arcs of electricity that crackled and lashed out like striking vipers. The smell of ozone filled the air. Lance's grip tightened on his rifle. That's a damn UFO, man. His voice cracked slightly, panic breaking through his usual bravado. He raised his weapon and fired, a stream of burning bullets racing toward the machine. The round struck its surface, sparking but doing no real damage. A surge of electricity shot down in response, nearly frying them both. Get down! Bill grabbed Lance by the collar and yanked him behind a half-buried metal barricade, just as another bolt scorched the ground where they had stood. Lance was breathing hard, his hands clenched around his rifle like a lifeline. You saw it, Bill. You saw that thing. That's not human. That's not. Bill cut him off with a slap across the face. Lance blinked. His breathing steadied. Bill stared him down. Pull it together. Lance's jaw tensed. He wiped at his mouth, then nodded, his grip firming. The machine above them hummed louder, preparing another strike. Bill peeked over their cover, eye scanning for weaknesses. All right, he muttered. Let's figure out how to kill this thing. The machine hovered above like a metallic god, humming with lethal energy as lightning pulsed through its rotating core. The wind ripped across the snow field, making the air hiss, and the storm whipped Lance's scarf around his face like a flag of surrender. Lance, focus! Bill barked, snapping in front of him. I need you. We can't take this thing down unless we work together. Lance shook his head as if trying to shake water out of his ears. It's just, what if there's more of them? What if this is just the start? Then we fight every last one of them. But we start with this bastard. Eyes up. Bill shoved a grenade into Lance's hand. We need to get under it. Its bolts arc outward, it's weakest from below. I'll draw its fire, you circle wide, get close, and toss this into its underbelly. You still with me? Lance nodded, clenching the grenade tightly. With you. Bill sprang from cover and opened fire, round striking the UFO's spinning shell. The machine responded instantly, unleashing a net of electricity in his direction. He jumped behind a rusted-out snow crawler, sparks exploding around him. Lance moved low and fast, hugging the curve of the snowbanks. His breath burned in his chest, but he pushed forward, adrenaline overriding fear. The machine fired again, this time toward Bill's position, another bolt narrowly missing and blasting the vehicle apart. Bill rolled and scrambled to another hunk of metal, shooting upward to keep the machine's attention. Lance reached the edge of the field, ducking beneath its massive spinning form. From below, he could see the core exposed briefly each time it rotated, a glowing blue orb surrounded by spinning vanes. That was the spot. He flicked the pin from the grenade and waited, counted the rotations. 3, 2, and now. He hurled the grenade upward with every ounce of strength he had. It arced perfectly, bouncing once against the undercarriage and dropping right into the exposed core. Lance hit the ground and covered his head. Boom! The explosion rocked the sky. The core erupted in a flash of light and fire, and the machine let out a piercing electronic scream as it broke apart midair. Its pieces scattered across the snow like shards of a shattered star, flaming debris lighting the field around them. Silence followed. Even the storm seemed to hush for a moment. Bill climbed out from the rubble of the snow crawler, coughing. Nice arm, he said, limping toward Lance. Lance let out a breathless laugh. Yeah. I played baseball in high school. Bill grinned, clapping him on the shoulder. Then let's keep pitching. We've still got a war to win. They turned toward the looming base ahead, snow swirling, weapons hot, hearts pounding, but steady. Chapter 9. Bill kicked the doors open with a grunt, and he and Lance swept into the facility with rifles raised, scanning every corner. But instead of resistance, they were met with a stillness so deep it almost felt sacred. No guards, no alarms, just the low moan of wind behind them and the occasional creak of metal under the snow's weight. Something's off, Bill muttered, his boots echoing in the empty corridor. Why are all of these facilities unmanned? Doesn't make any sense. Lance didn't answer, eyes darting around the dark hallways like he expected something to leap out at any moment. The walls were slick with condensation, and faint frost clung to exposed pipes running along the ceiling. Consoles were dark, doors ajar, and the ever-present hum of machinery was completely absent. They cleared room after room, weapons trained, breath visible in the freezing air. Nothing. No one left, Lance said at last, lowering his rifle. They abandoned it, or they didn't need it anymore. Bill approached a control panel and hit a few switches. Nothing happened. Power's out, he said. Let's find the central relay. It took another 15 minutes of tense, silent exploration to find the generator room. Lance stood guard while Bill worked the controls, flipping switches and adjusting dials. With a groan, the old backup power cells kicked in, and a faint, distant thrum pulsed through the walls as life returned to the station. Lights flickered on one by one. Vent side open. Terminals booted up with harsh digital chimes. Back in the command center, they approached a row of terminals. Bill immediately dropped into a chair and began interfacing with the communications relay, fingers dancing over keys as he initiated a signal burst. "Come on. Come on, reach," he muttered. Beside him, Lance stared blankly at a terminal's interface. Dozens of folders and encrypted strings scrolled across the screen. He pecked at the keyboard with 2 fingers. "Where's the part that says top secret alien invasion plan?" he grumbled. Bill glanced at him, a small smirk tugging at the edge of his mouth. "Try not to break anything." Lance squinted, jabbing at something labeled RF_compsync.9. The screen blinked, and a cascade of unread messages flashed by: error codes, movement logs, corrupted feeds. Nothing that made sense to him. "This is all just junk," he said, frustrated. "Red Falcon's gotta be hiding something in here, but I don't speak computer. Keep looking. Keywords, locations, anything about troop movement. You can read, right?" Bill's voice was focused, clipped. Lance grunted. "Not if it's all in code." Across the room, Bill's communicator blinked and beeped. He sat up straight. A distorted voice crackled through. "This is Central, repeat, read you, partial transmission, Bill, confirm status." Bill leaned into the MIC. "Central, this is Contra 1. We're inside the northern station. Hostiles neutralized. Facility abandoned. We're attempting data recovery. The response was delayed and broken. For interference, keep comms brief, investigate further." The signal dropped. Bill sighed and leaned back in the chair. At least they know we're still alive. Lance turned toward him, his face more serious than usual. "Bill, if we don't find something here soon, I'm not sure we'll get another chance." Bill looked over the cold glow of the terminals, the empty station, the untouched snow outside. "Then we dig," he said. "Until we find the truth." Bill was halfway to the door when the terminal behind him crackled to life again. "Squad compromised, repeat, alien life forms confirmed." He froze, turning back just as more voices came through, garbled by static and distance. "Prepare the chopper. Can't risk containment failure. The island, it's the only way." Then silence. Lance's head slowly turned toward the screen, his face tightening. Did they just say? The terminal let out one final click, then went dead. "No. No, no, no." Lance snapped. He stormed back toward the desk and slammed his fist into the terminal screen. The old plastic cracked under the blow. "I knew it. I knew they'd do this. They knew about the aliens all along." He shouted. "This was always the plan, clean it all up, bury it, us included." "Lance," Bill said, trying to keep his voice level. "You think Central ever gave a damn about us? We're assets, Bill. Disposables. They send us into hell, then wipe the map like it never happened. This whole time, they've known. And now they're pulling the plug." Bill's stomach turned, but he kept his expression flat. "We don't know that for sure." "Oh, come on, you heard it. Alien life forms confirmed. They're not just guessing anymore, Bill." "And nuking the island?" "That's not a maybe." He started pacing, breathing hard, rubbing his temples with shaking hands. "This is exactly what I was afraid of." Bill clenched his fists, trying to think. Trying to stay grounded. "Look. If they're prepping a chopper, that means there's still a way off this island. We find it. We get off this rock. Then we deal with command." Lance stopped pacing and looked at him, tension still boiling behind his eyes. But he gave a short nod. "Fine." But if I see anyone in a suit, I'm not asking questions." "Fair enough," Bill said. "Let's move." They stepped back into the corridor, the hum of power returning to the walls around them, but a deeper weight settling in the air. Every echo felt heavier now. Every shadow longer. Because now it wasn't just about Red Falcon. Or aliens. Now, they weren't sure who the enemy really was. And the clock was ticking. Chapter 10. The deeper Bill and Lance pushed into the facility, the colder and more industrial it became. Gone were the reinforced steel walls and humming lights of the upper levels. This part of the base felt ancient, a factory long forgotten. Rusted pipes lined the walls like arteries of a forgotten machine. Paint peeled from warning signs bolted to the walls, their messages barely legible through grime and corrosion. One sign, barely hanging on by a single bolt, creaked above a doorway, "Energy Zone." Bill flicked his eyes toward it. "This place looks older than we are." "Smells older too," Lance muttered, scrunching his nose as they passed through the heavy double doors. The room beyond opened into a cavernous chamber. Dim emergency lights flickered overhead, casting jagged shadows across long tracks of electrified minecarts that snaked across the floor like a dead railway. The smell of scorched metal and ozone hung thick in the air. Then, movement. From behind rusted bulkheads, Red Falcon soldiers burst forth, their crimson uniforms blending almost too well with the rust-colored metal. Gunfire erupted instantly. The sharp crack of rifles. The spark of energy weapons. Bill and Lance dove for cover behind a derailed minecart. Sparks exploded off its surface as rounds pinged against the metal. "Guess this place isn't as abandoned as it looks," Bill shouted over the chaos. "No kidding," Lance growled, already popping up to return fire. His burst dropped one soldier before he ducked again. Bill rolled out from cover, took aim, and squeezed the trigger. His rifle kicked as he clipped another soldier trying to flank them. Sparks erupted from a nearby wall-mounted turret as it powered up. "Turret!" Bill called out. Lance turned, gritted his teeth, and charged. He slid under a beam of blue light, skidding to a knee, and fired directly into the turret's base. It exploded in a shower of sparks. "That's how we do it." "Focus!" Bill barked, taking out two more enemies with tight, controlled bursts. More Red Falcon soldiers spilled in, bringing heavier firepower. One of them fell to Lance's shots, dropping a Red Falcon-marked attachment. Without hesitation, Lance snatched it up and slammed it onto his rifle. The barrel shifted, sprouting new vents. The air shimmered as he fired, the shot exploded in a wide, searing arc of fire. "Oh, it's good to have you back," he grinned manically. Bill blasted another trooper, then slid over to a fallen body and found his prize, a multi-shot spread attachment. He clicked it into place, and the next volley fanned out in a tight wedge, mowing down two enemies at once. They kept moving, using the terrain to their advantage, vaulting over crates, ducking under the minecart tracks, weaving between power conduits, picking up what tech attachments they could carry along the way. An enemy grenade rolled toward them, but Bill kicked it down a shaft before it detonated. One of the minecarts sparked to life ahead and rolled toward them at high speed, crackling with electricity. Bill and Lance leapt aside just as it barreled past, crushing two soldiers who weren't fast enough. "Electrified death carts," Bill muttered. "It's like we're in a goddamn video game." Lance cackled, switching to his flamethrower and torching another wave of enemies as they came through a side door. The screams of Red Falcon soldiers echoed off the metal walls. Eventually, the gunfire slowed. The bodies littered across the floor stopped moving. The only sounds were the dying whir of machinery and the slow drip of something unseen. Bill stood, panting, surveying the wreckage. Lance stepped beside him, adjusting his rifle, his face grim. "We clear?" Lance asked. "For now," Bill said. He looked ahead, at the winding track disappearing deeper into shadow, at the old bulkhead marked with radiation warnings and danger signs. The deeper they pressed into the energy zone, the louder everything became. Sparks rained from busted conduits above. Electric arcs leapt between rails on the floor. Steam hissed from broken vents, clouding the narrow walkways. The whole facility seemed to be waking up, one dying machine at a time. Red Falcon forces came in harder now, better armored, better armed. Turrets popped from the walls without warning. Automated drones zipped overhead like steel hornets, spraying suppressive fire. Bill and Lance moved like ghosts between cover, firing in bursts, ducking behind machinery, never staying still long enough to be pinned down. "We've got to be close," Bill muttered, slamming a fresh mag into his rifle as they caught a moment of breath behind a steel pillar. "They wouldn't throw this much at us unless we were right on top of something big." "Yeah," Lance said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Like a damn hornet nest." Bill eyed him. "You holding up?" Lance snorted. "Don't start getting sentimental on me." Before Bill could respond, Lance was already moving ahead, weaving between crates, rifle raised. Bill followed, heart thudding harder than it should. He could tell something was changing in Lance, but there was no time to dig into it. They followed the corridor until it widened into a massive loading bay. The walls stretched high into darkness, lit only by flickering hazard lights and the occasional buzz of electric discharge. At the far end stood another heavy blast door, but it wasn't alone. In front of it, slumped like a dead sentinel, was a massive bipedal robot. Its metal body was thick with grime and scorch marks, arms like construction cranes ending in articulated fingers the size of dinner plates. One red eye was dim, barely glowing. Bill raised his hand, motioning for caution. "Hang on. That thing." A deep whir echoed from the robot's chest. The red eye blinked fully awake, flooding the room in crimson light. "Too late," Lance muttered. The robot's limbs jerked once, then it lunged forward with terrifying speed. "Move!" They scattered as the giant machine roared to life. It had no guns, no rockets, just brute force. It swung wildly, slamming a massive hand down where Lance had been a moment before, cratering the floor. Bill opened fire on its joints, but the bullets sparked uselessly off the thick plating. "Climb it!" Bill shouted, dodging another sweep of its arm. Lance didn't hesitate. He sprinted up a nearby crate stack and jumped, grabbing onto a pipe along the robot's back as it turned to swat at Bill. He scrambled higher, slipping, grabbing whatever he could. Bill slid under a swipe, tossed a grenade upward, and it detonated against the machine's lower chassis, but the thing just kept moving. "Where's the weak spot?" Lance yelled from the robot's shoulder, clinging on for dear life as it thrashed. Bill's eyes flicked around, then he spotted it, a vented panel in the center of its back, glowing faintly blue. "There! It's back, just under the spine joint." "Got it!" The robot reached back, trying to grab Lance, but its arms were too bulky. He held on with one hand, swung his rifle with the other, and fired point-blank into the vent. Sparks flew, but it wasn't enough. "Too thick!" Lance shouted. "Need something heavier." Bill reached into his belt, pulled out a flame attachment. "Catch!" He hurled it up. Lance snagged it midair, armed it, and jammed the tip of his rifle into the opening, holding down the trigger with force as the flames shot inside the animatronic, burning and melting it from the inside. Lance pushed off and leapt just as the robot twisted violently, roaring with static. The explosion was sharp and bright. the machine let out a strangled mechanical wail as its spine lit up with fire. It staggered, limbs locking, and fell forward in a thunderous crash that shook the entire bay. Dust and sparks settled slowly. Bill rushed over. Lance was lying nearby, coughing, armor scorched but intact. Bill helped him to his feet. "Still think I'm being sentimental?" Bill asked, smirking. Lance groaned. "Shut up." The blast door groaned open with a mechanical growl, gears grinding like the place was protesting their progress. Beyond it lay a ramp sloping downward, steeper than expected, as if the whole facility was dug straight into the Earth's crust. Dim lights flickered overhead, bathing the descent in a dull red hue that pulsed like a heartbeat. Bill stepped in first, rifle raised. "They're not just hiding something down here. They're protecting something." Lance followed, glancing at the walls, thicker, reinforced. "Feels like a bunker inside a bunker." As they descended, the air grew hotter. Pipes hissed, dripping condensation. A rhythmic thud-thud-thud echoed from deep below, mechanical and alive. The floor trembled slightly with every beat. It wasn't just more of the same. This was something else. Suddenly, clang! Massive spike traps slammed from either side of the corridor just ahead, missing Bill by inches. A fraction slower and he would have been crushed into paste. The spikes hissed back into hidden compartments in the walls with a sharp pneumatic hiss. "Traps now?" Bill growled. "They're getting desperate." "They know we're here," Lance said. No more subtlety. No sooner had he spoken than alarms blared to life, shrill, jagged sirens that lit up the hall with flashing red light. Doors on the side slammed open, and red Falcon troops began pouring in like ants from a split nest. "They're not gonna stop coming," Lance shouted, unloading into the first wave. The corridor lit up in staccato bursts of gunfire. Bullets ricocheted off walls. Enemies dropped, but more kept coming, pressing from all angles. Bill tossed a grenade and vaulted over a railing to take higher ground. Lance rolled forward, slammed into cover behind a generator box, and returned fire with ruthless efficiency. The spike traps reset and slammed again behind them, this time crushing a few unlucky Red Falcon soldiers in a spray of metal and gore. "Keep moving," Bill shouted. "We stop, we die." They pushed through the hail of bullets, ducking between cover, stepping over bodies. More machinery came to life, giant mechanical arms sweeping across walkways, forcing them to duck and leap with precise timing. The entire place had become a gauntlet of death. In one narrow corridor, the walls themselves began shifting, metal plates retracting and extending, trying to shove or crush anything between them. Lance dove through just in time as one panel slammed shut behind him with a clang. "This place was never built for people," he muttered. "No," Bill said, sliding beside him. "It was built to keep people out." As they caught their breath, they saw the passage open into a huge chamber ahead, lit brighter than anything so far, with spiraling pipes along the walls and a faint glow pulsing from the depths below. It wasn't a control center. It wasn't a hangar. It was something else entirely. "Whatever this is," Bill said, narrowing his eyes, "we're right on top of it." Lance cocked his weapon and started forward. "Then let's find out what it is." They moved deeper, not slowing down. The facility was alive, and it knew they were coming. Bill and Lance pushed deeper into the heart of the complex, the corridor twisting into an uneven maze of catwalks and maintenance shafts. Pipes burst with steam overhead, and the walls pulsed with cables that throbbed like veins, alive, almost. The deeper they went, the louder the hum of machinery became, a low, resonant growl that made their bones vibrate. Then came the ambush. From both sides of the corridor, Red Falcon troops dropped from hidden alcoves and ceiling vents, their armor now fused with glowing, alien circuitry. Their rifles fired erratic bursts of plasma, searing the walls with violet streaks. "Contact left!" Bill roared, ducking as a plasma bolt melted a chunk of the wall behind him. He rolled forward, slid into cover behind a large steel crate, and returned fire. His bullets pinged uselessly off one soldier's shielded chest plate, until Lance fired a single well-placed shot, straight through a weak point beneath the arm, and dropped him cold. The combat got faster, messier. Enemies moved with unnatural speed. One leapt from a ledge and nearly landed on Bill, only to be drop-kicked in mid-air by Lance, who then used the enemy's own rifle to mow down two more. Getting real tired of these guys upgrading mid-fight, Lance muttered, tossing an attachment aside as it shorted out in his hands. Bill didn't answer. He was focused, eyes narrowed on what lay ahead. They rounded a corner, and froze. A vast chamber opened up before them. At the far end stood an enormous fortified wall, easily 3 stories high, bristling with mounted weapons and unfamiliar tech. Twin barrels protruded from the upper tiers, tracking back and forth like watchful eyes. Strange coils glowed along the lower edges, flickering with an electric blue shimmer. It wasn't just a wall, it was a perimeter defense system, alien and human tech fused into a single abomination. "No cover," Bill muttered. "Dead zone." The floor between them and the wall was wide open, polished metal with deep scoring from previous blasts. On the far side, slits in the wall began to open, revealing sentry turrets and autoguns already locking onto them. Lance pulled a Red Falcon rifle from a downed enemy and yanked the attachment from the rifle and jamming it into his own. Bill did the same, sliding a strange coil attachment onto the underside of his barrel. It sparked once, then glowed with an unstable light. They were as prepared as they could be. The hum of the wall deepened. A spotlight snapped on, blinding white, fixing on them. Then all hell broke loose. Twin turrets on the top of the wall opened fire, raining hot plasma bolts and explosive shells. The floor around them shattered, throwing up shrapnel and fire. Bill leapt forward, firing on the move, his modified rifle screaming with each shot, red bolts slicing through the defensive coils lining the lower tiers. Lance charged at full sprint, zigzagging between bursts of energy fire, throwing a grenade with all of his might. It arced and detonated with a thunderous blast against the wall, ripping open one of the gun emplacements in a burst of fire and alien sparks. The turret shifted, tracking him now, but Bill used the distraction to slide into a divot in the floor, bracing himself and unleashing a full auto barrage on the exposed inner workings of the wall. Another explosion. Then a third. The floor was chaos, glowing wreckage, craters, the metallic tang of smoke and plasma filling the air. Lance vaulted over a low ridge and landed near the base of the wall. "I see a panel," he shouted, pointing to a section pulsing with red light. "Covering you!" Bill shouted back, and opened up on the remaining turret. Lance slammed his rifle into the panel, literally driving it like a pry bar, and squeezed the trigger. The modified weapon firing directly into the wall circuits with a screech of searing light. The wall shrieked. For a moment it almost sounded alive. Then it exploded, partially, violently. A fireball rolled upward as the turrets jerked, fizzled, and went limp. The gate in the center hissed as locks disengaged one by one, steam pouring from the cracks. Bill joined him at the threshold, both panting, scorched, their gear fried around the edges. Lance glanced at the wreckage, then at Bill. "I'm getting real sick of not knowing what we're up against." Bill nodded grimly, eyes fixed on the door. "Let's go find out." Chapter 11. The massive gate ground open with a teeth-rattling groan, smoke and scorched debris spilling past Bill and Lance as they stepped cautiously inside. What lay beyond stopped them cold. The steel and circuitry of the facility ended the moment they crossed the threshold. In its place was something alive. The corridor pulsed beneath their boots, deep red, slick, and glistening like wet muscle. It felt soft underfoot, like stepping on the underside of a tongue. Veins the size of electrical cables throbbed in the walls, running along the length of the chamber in rhythmic, pulsing waves. The air was hot and damp, thick with a smell somewhere between blood and rot. Lance took a step back. What the hell is this? The chamber opened up wider ahead, revealing grotesque curvature, rounded arches that bent unnaturally, like the ribcage of some impossibly massive beast. And then they saw them. Soldiers. Hundreds, maybe more, of Red Falcon troops embedded into the walls. Their faces were slack, eyes open but unfocused, as if in a waking coma. Fleshy tendrils had fused their armor into the structure, binding them chest-deep in the meat of the walls. Some twitched. One's mouth moved slowly, muttering something silent, his jaw barely functional beneath layers of sinew. Lance turned away, jaw clenched. They are still alive. Bill scanned the walls, heart thudding in his ears. No. They're part of it now, or maybe they always were. A sudden skittering made them both snap their rifles up. Tiny alien creatures, hairless, pale, insect-like, scurried across the walls in bursts of impossible speed. Each was the size of a dog, with long clawed limbs and gaping mouths set into the tops of their heads. One paused for a second, staring with black pit-like eyes, then darted into a fleshy crevice and vanished. The chamber breathed. A low thwoomp-thwoomp sound filled the air, rhythmic and constant, like they were inside a living lung. The ceiling above dripped a clear fluid in slow, methodical droplets, and the light came not from bulbs but glowing red sacs embedded high in the walls, pulsing in time with the breath. Bill swallowed hard. His gut twisted. For the first time since they dropped into the base, he felt something like fear. He turned to Lance. "You good?" Lance didn't answer right away. He was staring up at one of the walls, where a soldier's face had frozen mid-scream. The flesh had grown over his mouth, sealing it shut. Lance finally nodded, curt and slow. "Yeah," he said. "Just wasn't expecting this." "Me neither," Bill replied, voice low. They moved forward, carefully. Every step squished slightly. The silence between them grew heavier, not from mistrust, but from awe and dread. Their war had started in jungles and blizzards, with guns and machines and men. This was no longer that war. They walked in silence, the red pulsing walls slowly narrowing into a tunnel that curved downward like the gullet of some massive beast. The strange light dimmed with each step, shadows swallowing their backs. The soft squelch of their boots was the only sound, until Bill stopped. He put a hand on Lance's chest. "Hold up." Lance turned, brow furrowed. "What is it?" Bill didn't answer right away. He looked down the tunnel, then back the way they'd come, back toward the steel door that was now barely visible in the dim red haze. His jaw tightened, and he let out a slow breath. "This isn't just a base infiltration anymore," Bill said, voice low but firm. "It stopped being that a long time ago." Lance glanced around, as if the pulsing flesh walls weren't already screaming that truth loud enough. Bill continued, eyes locked on him. "We're deep into something we weren't trained for, Lance. This isn't jungle warfare, or some rogue state uprising. This is something alien. This whole place, it's alive. And it's not going to let us leave easy." Lance didn't respond, waiting. Bill hesitated. "You've always had a gut instinct. And I know how this stuff messes with you. If your gut tells you get out of here, then listen to it and get out. But I'm not stopping. He let the words hang. The walls pulsed gently, like the chamber itself was listening. I'm saying, Bill looked away for a second. I'm saying if you want to turn back now, I get it. You've done enough. You've gone farther than anyone would expect. Hell, farther than anyone else could. But I'm going to see this through. One way or another. Lance stared at him, unreadable. Then his lip curled slightly. You done? Bill raised an eyebrow. I didn't come this far to turn back, Lance said, voice flat, eyes steady. I don't care what this thing is. If it thinks it can set up shop on our planet, it's got another thing coming. He extended a hand. We finish this. Bill nodded. No more words were needed. They clasped hands, hard. It wasn't just solidarity. It was finality. A warrior's handshake. A brotherhood forged in war and sealed in something far stranger. Then, without a word, they turned and continued down the pulsing corridor, deeper into the lair. The corridor narrowed and twisted, the air growing thick and warm like breath inside a beast's throat. Veins pulsed along the fleshy walls, their crimson glow casting grotesque shadows that danced with every step. The organic floor quivered beneath their boots, like it felt them. Then came the sound. Wet. Skittering. Not behind. Ahead. Bill raised his rifle. Eyes up. They emerged from the walls like pus from a wound, small alien creatures no bigger than a dog, their glistening carapaces slick with some milky secretion. Their limbs twitched with unnatural speed, and their bulbous eyes locked onto the intruders. The first one launched forward with a shriek, legs ablur. Blam! Bill's shot hit its center mass, and the creature detonated in a spray of acid and meat, its shriek silenced in a burst of gore. Another followed. Then 2 more. Then 10. The hallway lit with muzzle flashes as the swarm came alive. Creatures burst into showers of bile and gore, their bodies popping like overripe fruit under high-velocity rounds. Acid sprayed the walls, sizzling holes into the already festering tissue. Lance reloaded, breathing fast. They just keep coming. Then keep firing. Bill barked, gunning down 3 more in a wide sweep. The floor was a slick mess of alien fluids now, the stench nauseating, but there was no time to stop. They fought their way forward, deeper, the tunnel widening into a vast chamber. And then they saw it. A face. Massive. Alien. Unblinking. It was embedded in the far wall and curved into the ceiling, its leathery skin stretched taut over bone-like ridges. It had hollow pits where eyes should be, weeping black fluid that dripped down into grates carved into the fleshy floor. Its mouth was a gaping maw lined with jagged teeth, each one taller than a man. And as they approached, it began to twitch. Lance's boots skidded to a stop. What the hell is that? The jaw unhinged with a slow, splitting creak. A thick, choking steam poured from its depths. Then it screeched. Dozens of the creatures shot from its throat, flung like living bullets from deep inside the beast. They skittered along the floor, up the walls, down from the ceiling. A full-on swarm. Fall back! Bill yelled, firing upward and shredding the first wave mid-air. Don't let them get close. The air filled with gunfire and screams. Alien bodies exploded mid-leap. Bile sprayed across their armor, sizzling on contact. Lance flung a grenade into the open mouth, and it boomed with a muffled crunch, the face spasming, teeth clenching down in pain. The swarm kept coming. Bill turned to Lance. We need to shut that mouth. Lance glanced around, then pointed to the glistening muscle strands along the ceiling. Shoot the tendons. Together, they redirected fire, bullets chewing through the pulsating tissue that held the mouth open. With a final scream, the jaw snapped shut with a meaty slam, crushing several creatures mid-emergence, cutting off the flood. Panting, slick with alien filth, Bill and Lance stood among the smoldering remains. The face twitched once more, then went still. "Let's keep moving," Bill said, voice grim. The pulsing grew louder. Faster. A deep, rhythmic thump-thump-thump that echoed off the walls like a heartbeat amplified 1,000 times over. The flesh beneath their boots rippled with each beat, and the tunnel ahead began to undulate, walls shifting in and out like lungs gasping for air. "Ooh," Lance muttered, wiping the slime off his face for the 5th time. "How much deeper can this thing go?" Bill chuckled, stepping over a burst-open pot that still steamed with acid. "There he is." "There who is?" "You." Complaining. Sarcastic. Human. He side-eyed him. "Good to have you back." Lance rolled his eyes, but the faintest grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Yeah, well, just wish we were back in the jungle shooting the dudes." "I don't." Another pulse rattled the walls. They were alive now, literally. The tunnel began convulsing, its fleshy interior warping inward, bulging out as if trying to close in on them. "Move!" Bill shouted. The two broke into a sprint, boots slamming against the heaving tissue. Behind them, the tunnel collapsed, muscle and sinew squeezing shut with a horrible wet crunch. Alien shrieks echoed from the vents above as small, shrill creatures rained down around them, flung like pests from bursting sacks in the ceiling. Lance ducked as one launched toward his face. God, why is it always in the face? Bill dropped another with a clean shot, never breaking stride. "Run now, complain later." The passage forked, then curved, then twisted back on itself like a coiling intestine. It was no longer clear what direction they were headed, only that forward was the only way out. The walls continued to move, contracting and expanding like a throat preparing to swallow. Thin spines began to jut from the floor and ceiling, snapping out like fangs. One nearly caught Bill's leg, slicing through his pants as he dove clear. "They're trying to crush us," Lance panted. "Then don't slow down." A massive beast dropped from the ceiling, landing hard in front of them. Twice the size of the others, its chitinous skin shimmered with acid, and its limbs moved in a blur of death. Bill didn't hesitate. He dropped to one knee and fired a barrage of red Falcon charged rounds straight into the thing's gaping chest. The rounds hit hard, erupting in bursts of searing light. The creature wailed, then exploded, coating the walls in burning filth. They kept moving, diving through the smoke and gore, every muscle screaming. Behind them, the tunnel collapsed entirely, sealing shut like a sphincter. There was no going back now. Finally, the tunnel opened into another chamber, this one oddly calm. The walls shimmered in a low, amber glow. The pulsing was still there, faster now. Closer. Bill dropped to a crouch, checking his weapon. "You good?" Lance caught his breath, eyes on the quivering walls. "I'm fine. I just hate this place." Bill nodded. "Then we're in agreement." They stood together in the amber light, listening as something massive stirred deeper within. Whatever lay ahead, it was waiting for them. Chapter 12. They stepped into the chamber and stopped cold. It stretched out before them like a cathedral built by nightmares, towering flesh walls veined with black and red, pulsing under an eerie orange light. The air was thick, humid, and stank of rot. But it wasn't the size or the stench that made them freeze. It was the eggs. Thousands of them. Bulbous pods covered the floor, shoulder-high and twitching, slick with mucus. Some were still. Others quivered gently. A few were already splitting open, leaking shadows. "Tell me those are just disgusting decorations," Lance said. Bill stepped forward slowly, leveling his rifle. "They're not." A sudden, wet snap echoed as one egg tore open, and a creature leapt out, small, fast, with razor limbs and rows of teeth that looked too big for its body. Bill blasted it midair. It burst in a spray of fluid and steam. Then 10 more eggs started shaking. "Oh, come on," Lance groaned. The creatures hatched in a frenzy, hissing and clicking, crawling over each other to get at them. Bill opened fire, cutting them down by the dozen, but it wasn't enough. Lance tore open a pouch on his belt and grabbed a red Falcon mod with a stylized flame logo. He slammed it into his weapon with a metallic click, eyes narrowing. "Let's make scrambled eggs." The nozzle of his rifle flared to life with an angry roar. He stepped forward into the swarm, sweeping the flame side to side, and the eggs ignited in thick clusters, each one popping like a boil under the heat. The hatchlings screamed as they burned, skittering in circles before collapsing into black sludge. The chamber lit up like a crematorium, smoke choking the air. Bill kept the rear locked down, fending off waves of creatures trying to flank them. "Keep moving. Don't stop." Lance didn't stop. He plowed forward, stepping over burning carcasses, his flamethrower slicing a path through the egg field. Each burst of flame echoed like a scream inside the walls. And the walls screamed back. The pulsing around them accelerated, now less a heartbeat and more a seizure. Flesh spasmed. The ceiling shuddered. Thick fluid rained from cracks in the walls, and a deep moaning sound vibrated through the floor. Bill stumbled as the ground pitched under him. "It's feeling this, every burn, every shot." "You saying it's alive?" Lance shouted, torching another wave of hatchlings. "I'm saying we're inside it." More eggs burst open ahead of them, but the horde was thinning. The fire had spread, licking at the walls, driving the survivors into the open where Bill's rifle dropped them with precision. The final few creatures lunged and burned in midair, shrieking as they vanished in flame. Then the chamber fell still. Smoke hung low, clinging to their boots. The walls still pulsed, but slower now, like a beast in pain. Bill and Lance stood in the middle of the carnage, weapons hot, hearts pounding. "That enough scrambled for you?" Bill asked. Lance kicked over a smoldering egg. "I hate breakfast." They reloaded, flames flickering behind them, and turned toward the next passage, one that seemed to breathe open, welcoming them deeper. Whatever waited ahead, it knew they were coming. And it was awake. The halls narrowed. Gone were the hordes of creatures. Gone were the shrieks and the clatter of claws. Only silence remained, broken by the steady, slow thump that echoed through the walls, the floor, the very air around them. It was deeper now. Closer. They passed through corridor after corridor, each more unsettling than the last. The walls no longer just pulsed, they contracted, like lungs gasping in slow agony. Veins as thick as fire hoses coiled across the ceiling, twitching with each beat, trailing wetly behind them as they walked. A doorway yawned open ahead, taller and darker than the others. They stepped through, and saw it. The heart. It filled the chamber. Suspended from the ceiling by a tangled web of sinew and veins, the organ writhed in its own rhythm, massive and swollen, slick with mucus and blood. It pulsed with an awful thumping sound that rattled their bones, a beat that shook the floor with every throb. Each pulse sent a ripple through the walls, like the whole lair was tethered to this single, grotesque engine. The heart was fused to the chamber, its veins sunk deep into the walls, some of them pulsing with glowing fluid. Smaller organs clung to its surface like tumors, twitching in time with it, while transparent sacs bulged with embryonic creatures waiting to hatch. The stench was beyond rotting, thick with copper, bile, and something unnatural. Something ancient. Lance staggered back a step. "Jesus!" Bill said nothing. His face was stone, eyes locked on the grotesque mass. Slowly, he raised his rifle. "This is it," he said. Lance pulled out his flamethrower again, clenching his jaw. "You think killing this thing shuts it all down? We're not leaving it beating." The heart pulsed harder now, faster, as if it knew. The veins on the walls recoiled, tensing like muscles. A shriek rippled through the chamber, not from a creature, but from the walls themselves. The entire lair screamed with it. Bill and Lance braced, weapons drawn. "No backup?" Bill muttered. "No retreat," Lance replied. Then together, without a second of hesitation, they opened fire. Chapter 13. Gunfire lit the chamber like a strobe. Bill's rifle spat armor-piercing rounds into the heaving bulk of the heart, each impact bursting open chunks of its slick, fleshy surface. Lance ignited his flame attachment, streams of fire carving across the organ's veins and sacs. The smell of scorched meat filled the air, thick and nauseating. The heart shrieked, a high-pitched, biological howl that vibrated through their skulls. Then the walls split open. Dozens of holes tore through the pulsing flesh, gaping like mouths, and from them poured the creatures. Spindly and twisted, bone-white and glistening, they leapt toward Bill and Lance in a tide of claws, teeth, and screeching hatred. "Left side!" Lance shouted, spinning and roasting a wall of them as they leapt. The flames cooked them mid-air, some hit the ground already curled in death, others flailed and screeched before exploding in bursts of acidic gore. Bill ducked as one of them sprang from a vein overhead. He jammed his rifle up and fired, blowing it apart inches from his face. The spray sizzled on his vest, burning into the fabric. He rolled forward, catching another on his boot, and crushed it with a sharp stomp. The heart pulsed harder. Faster. More creatures came. From the walls. The ceiling. Even out of the floor. It was like the lair itself was vomiting its entire immune system to protect the heart. "We're not making a dent," Lance yelled, already tearing into another batch with fire. "This thing won't go down easy." "We don't need easy," Bill growled, flipping his rifle to full auto. He fired directly into a glowing vein, the fluid inside sparking and bursting like live wires. The heart flinched, actually flinched, and the creatures all around it stuttered for a moment, shrieking in pain. Lance saw it too. Hit the veins. They changed tactics. Bill tore into the root-like cords with precise bursts, while Lance bathed them in fire. Each rupture caused the heart to shudder and howl, and with every damaged vein, the room seemed to fight harder, walls lurching in, floors rippling beneath their boots. One of the creatures got close, too close. It tackled Bill to the ground, razor-sharp arms slashing wildly. He caught it by the throat, struggling as its mouth opened wide over his face. A shot rang out, Lance, no hesitation, one clean shot between the creature's eyes. "Back in the fight, buddy," Lance said. Bill pushed up, blood in his teeth. Still breathing. More creatures came, sprinting from the walls. Lance pulled a grenade from his belt, primed it, and lobbed it into the cluster. The explosion lit up the chamber in fire and bone. Screaming echoed all around them, some from the aliens, some from the heart itself. The floor under them pulsed erratically now. The walls heaved like they were hyperventilating. They were getting close. But the creatures weren't stopping. And neither were they. The room had become a storm of chaos. Fire, bullets, blood, every second was a fight to stay alive. The creatures were endless, a seething flood of limbs and teeth and hate. The heart pulsed faster now, like it was trying to outrun death, each thump shaking the floor beneath their boots. Bill ducked behind a twisted rib of bone jutting from the floor, yanked out a red Falcon attachment from his pack, and clicked it into place beneath his rifle's barrel with a satisfying clunk. "Bill, what are you doing?" Lance shouted, torching a wave of screeching horrors. Bill grinned. "Changing the plan." Without another word, he bolted forward. "Bill!" Lance yelled after him, eyes wide. Bill sprinted straight into the mass of creatures, spread shot blazing. The weapon thundered in a cone of destruction, wide arcs of hot lead tearing through anything in front of him. The monsters exploded in showers of flesh and acid. He didn't flinch. He didn't stop. It was reckless. It was suicide. And it was working. He jumped past a cluster of flailing arms, rolled through a wave of gore, and came up firing straight into the thickest of the heart's veins. Chunks of the pulsating tissue burst apart like overripe fruit, spraying black-red fluid across the chamber. The heart screamed. A sound that wasn't sound at all, more like a living roar through their bones. The walls quaked violently. Veins writhed and tore free from the ceiling like severed limbs, spewing fluid. Creatures spasmed and screeched, writhing in confusion. "Bill, damn it!" Lance ran forward, elbowing through the chaos, incinerating what he could. "You'll get yourself killed." Bill kept going. 2 more shots. A third. The final vein snapped like a power line. The heart convulsed violently, bulging outward, then shrank in on itself, trembling. A horrible keening scream ripped through the air, then, with a final seismic shudder, it began to rupture. Chunks of the monstrous organ blew outward, geysers of fluid and bone shooting across the room. Flames licked the walls. The light turned blood red. The creatures all around them stopped moving, frozen mid-attack, jaws hanging open, then one by one they began to detonate in place. Bursts of flesh and pressure, like they were wired to the thing's life force. "Now!" Lance grabbed Bill by the vest, hauling him back as alien gore rained from above. "It's going down, we're going now." Bill, dazed but grinning, stumbled with him. "Thought I'd try being the crazy one for once," he yelled over the roar of collapsing walls. "Don't get used to it." Lance shouted back. "I hate your impression of me." Together, they ran, ducking debris, dodging the last explosive bursts of alien tissue as the lair began to collapse behind them. Chapter 14. The walls around them screamed. Not just sound, but a living, agonized howl that shook the corridors as if the lair itself were dying. The pulsing glow flickered erratically, veins snapping like whips across the walls, spraying black ichor that sizzled on contact with fire. The ground lurched violently beneath their boots. Bill and Lance ran. Flames licked at their backs, chasing them through collapsing tunnels. The air was thick with smoke and the metallic tang of alien blood. Jagged chunks of bone and wall burst from the sides of the corridor, thrown outward by internal detonations. The very structure of the lair was giving way, cracking and folding inward. "This place is falling apart!" Lance yelled, coughing as he dove under a drooping mass of shredded membrane. "Then we keep moving!" Bill shouted, dragging him up and forward as another explosion rippled down the hall. A blast hit behind them, the shockwave hurling Bill off his feet. He slammed into the fleshy wall with a grunt and tumbled to the floor. Lance turned on instinct, grabbed him by the strap of his rifle, and yanked him up. "No time to be a hero now," Lance shouted. Bill spat blood and nodded, stumbling forward, one arm over Lance's shoulder as they kept moving. The lair buckled again. A wall in front of them split open with a shudder, revealing a narrow side passage lit by flickering alien fire. They didn't hesitate, they plunged in. Every step felt like it might be their last. The tunnel narrowed. Smoke burned their lungs. Alien growths collapsed across their path, trying to bar their exit, but they powered through, shooting, climbing, slipping through whatever gaps they could find. Then, light. A jagged tear in the ceiling above, a ragged hole torn open by the collapsing structure. The welcoming night sky calling to them. There! Bill shouted, pointing upward. They scrambled up a sloping, half-destroyed ledge of twitching alien flesh and stone. Lance climbed first, grabbing onto exposed roots and bones as handholds. He slipped once, Bill caught him. Then Bill climbed, his leg giving out halfway. Lance reached down, grit his teeth, and hauled him up with a shout. And then, they were out. They burst into open air, collapsing onto rocky ground slick with rain and ash. Gasping for breath, they stared up at the night, storm-choked sky. The burning stink of alien flesh still clung to their lungs, but it was the first breath of real air they'd had in what felt like forever. For a split second, it almost felt like safety. Then the island roared. The ground beneath them lurched, sending cracks tearing through the earth. A jagged tremor ripped across the jungle beyond, trees snapping and toppling like matchsticks. Fire burst from the soil in long, spiraling jets. The lair behind them caved in with a sound like the sky splitting apart. Bill rolled onto his side, trying to catch his breath, but already pushing up to his feet. Lance was scanning the surroundings, eyes wide. This whole place is coming down. The island's not just falling apart, it's going to blow. They both turned to look out past the tree line, where smoke and fire bled into the sky in all directions. The cliffs they'd scaled to reach the lair were gone, collapsed into the boiling sea below. Just waves crashing against burning coastline and the terrible, rising groan of something massive giving way deep underground. Bill clenched his jaw. Lance gave a dry, bitter laugh. Yeah. We made it out, and right into hell. Another explosion tore through the distance, sending a wave of heat and shock through the ground that nearly knocked them flat. A ridge behind them erupted, sending chunks of molten rock raining from the sky. They looked at each other, both battered, bloodied, burned. No more bravado. No more jokes. Just survival. Bill gripped his weapon tighter. We need to move. There's got to be something, somewhere. Every step was a gamble as Bill and Lance scrambled through the crumbling terrain, dodging falling trees, leaping over fresh fissures that opened like gaping maws beneath their feet. The heat was unbearable, the sound of detonations thundering through their bones like war drums. Smoke and fire painted the sky a sickly orange. But then, through it all, a different sound. A sharp, rhythmic familiar sound that didn't belong to the destruction around them. Lance skidded to a halt, panting hard. Wait. You hear that? Bill froze beside him. At first, it was hard to tell, so much noise, so much smoke, but then it came again. Clear. Closer. Rotor blades, Lance said, eyes scanning the horizon. Up through the haze, a dark shape emerged. A silhouette slicing through the sky. A military chopper, battered and listing slightly, but holding steady. There! Lance shouted, pointing. Both of them waved wildly, jumping, shouting with everything left in them. Bill fumbled for his communicator, flipping switches, and calling out over the static. Mayday! This is Contra Team. Mayday! We're on the island, repeat, we are on the island, request immediate evac. Nothing but static. But still, as if by a miracle, the chopper turned. It angled toward them, veering through the smoke as if answering the call all the same. The downdraft hit them first, sending debris swirling around their feet, then the belly of the chopper swept overhead, massive, loud, beautiful. A metal ladder dropped down from the open side hatch, swinging wildly in the wind. "Go!" Bill yelled, giving Lance a boost. Lance caught the ladder, pulling himself up fast, hand over hand. Bill was right behind him, climbing just as the ground below cracked open and belched fire where they'd been standing seconds before. Lance reached the hatch and a hand grabbed him, strong, gloved, familiar. He looked up to see the grizzled face of General Graves, battle-worn but grinning. The general hauled Lance in and reached back down for Bill, who scrambled up the last few rungs just as another explosion rocked the air. Inside, the roar of the chopper blades was deafening. Graves clapped them both hard on the back, his mouth moving fast, but his words were lost in the noise. Bill and Lance just stared at him, half laughing, half breathless, nodding as if they could hear every word, even though they couldn't. They'd made it. Somehow. But as the chopper banked hard away from the collapsing island, and the hellscape below shrank in the distance, none of them looked away. The island was a black wound on the ocean, shrinking beneath them as the chopper gained altitude. Bill and Lance sat slumped against the wall, chests heaving, sweat and blood crusting over their armor. Smoke spiraled from the burning jungle below. Even from this distance, they could see the terrain buckling and collapsing inward, the last death throes of something that should never have lived. Then Graves, still braced at the side hatch, suddenly straightened and shouted into his headset. His voice was lost under the roar, but the urgency in his expression said enough. He barked a string of rapid commands, then turned his gaze back toward the island. The soldiers in the cockpit did the same. Lance followed their eyes, brow furrowed. "What's he?" A bright flash cut him off. A second later, a deafening roar rolled across the sky as the entire island vanished in a massive explosion. A blinding white core bloomed into a towering mushroom cloud, swallowing the jungle, the mountain, the alien fortress, everything, in a single, searing moment. Bill shielded his face from the glare, his mouth slightly open. They bombed it. Lance watched, eyes wide. The shockwave didn't take long to catch up. A deep, concussive boom rocked the helicopter, shaking the air like thunder made solid. The chopper lurched violently as the blast wave slammed into them. Everyone inside grabbed what they could, railings, gear, each other, anything to keep from being flung out the open hatch. The instruments in the cockpit flickered. Warning lights flashed. For a second, it felt like they were going to drop right out of the sky. Then, slowly, the turbulence passed. The chopper steadied, groaning like a wounded beast but still flying. General Graves turned back toward them, his expression unreadable beneath the grime and flickering lights. He reached down and handed Bill and Lance each a headset. Bill took his, adjusted it, and nodded once he could hear. "Say that again, sir," he asked. Graves gave a rare, wry smile. "Welcome back, boys." The three of them sat in silence for a moment as the burning horizon faded behind them, the wind howling past the open door like a ghost retreating into the past. They were alive. For now. Inside the chopper, the adrenaline finally began to fade, leaving only the exhaustion. Bill and Lance collapsed into the bench seats, their weapons sliding from limp hands onto the vibrating floor. Blood and grime streaked their faces, and every muscle screamed from overexertion, but they were alive, and they'd won. Bill leaned back with a groan, letting his head rest against the vibrating wall. Lance was hunched forward, arms on his knees, still breathing hard. For a long moment, they said nothing. Then Bill extended a hand. Lance looked over, a tired grin tugging at one side of his face. He reached out, grasped Bill's hand, and gave it a firm shake. "Not bad for a reckless maniac," Lance muttered. Bill smirked. "I learned from the best." They leaned back in silence again, the wind from the open hatch whipping past them, the smoldering ruin of the island fading into the horizon. Chapter 15. The room was dark. Central Command's war chamber, deep beneath the earth, was a world away from the jungle and fire they'd just escaped. The hum of machines replaced the roar of explosions. Cool, sterile air had replaced smoke and blood. Bill and Lance sat side by side at a long, sleek metal table. Their uniforms were clean now, their wounds bandaged, but the shadows under their eyes told the truth. They'd seen hell. Across from them sat General Graves, his arms folded tight across his chest, his expression stony. Beside him was Supreme Chancellor Everett, a thin man in a sharp suit whose every word always seemed to carry the weight of politics behind it. His cold grey eyes studied the two soldiers like a chessboard. Next to him was Dr. Helena Kessler, sharp, brilliant, and visibly shaken. Her fingers tapped nervously on the table. "And that's when the heart exploded," Bill said at last, his voice low but steady. "We barely made it out. The whole damn island started coming down on top of us." Lance added, "We didn't even think we were going to make it out. If that chopper hadn't shown up when it did." General Graves leaned forward, exhaling slowly. "You two did your part. And then some." He turned slightly toward Everett, voice lowering. "We had lost your signal. We couldn't confirm if you were alive, but I demanded one last flyover before we pulled out." Chancellor Everett had already authorized the nuclear strike. Everett didn't flinch. "We had to eliminate the threat. The alien signature was increasing. If the infection had spread beyond the island." Graves cut in, a rare edge in his voice. "And we almost left our men behind to die. We had 10 minutes before the strike. I ordered a final sweep. They found you with less than 2 minutes to spare." Bill and Lance exchanged a glance. "We appreciate the save," Lance said, measured. "But maybe next time, wait until we're actually dead before you nuke the place." Dr. Kessler finally spoke up, her voice tense. "We had no idea the alien presence had reached that level of centralization. If that thing had escaped." She trailed off, eyes wide with the truth she had suddenly revealed. Then Lance leaned forward, jaw clenched, his fists tightening against the edge of the table. "You knew." His voice was low at first, trembling not with fear, but fury. "You knew it wasn't just terrorists. You knew about the aliens. And you sent us in blind." Graves straightened, his expression hardening. Everett shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "We had suspicions," Everett began. "Suspicions?" Lance shot to his feet, the chair screeching back against the floor. He slammed both fists onto the table. "You left us to die on that godforsaken island because of suspicions." Graves raised a hand, calm but firm. "Lance, you nuked the island." Lance barked. "You buried it. What the hell were we to you? Just a couple of expendable grunts." "We had to contain it," Everett said, voice taut. "If those damn aliens had gotten off the island, the loss would have been." "You think we didn't see the loss? We lived it." Lance's voice cracked at the edge, raw. He shook his head in disbelief and turned away from the table. "I'm done." He stormed out of the room, the metal door hissing open and shut behind him. Bill stood, pausing only a moment before following. But Graves caught his arm. Bill turned, eyes narrowing. "Let him go," Graves said quietly. Then, even lower, "Listen. What you saw on that island, the heart, the creatures, all of it, it stays classified. Consider yourselves lucky that we're letting you out of here at all." Bill stared at him. Graves continued, "This isn't just about you. We don't know the full scope yet. Panic won't help. We're not ready for the world to know we're not alone." Bill didn't say anything at first. His jaw tensed, then relaxed with a deep breath. "Fine." Graves nodded. Bill turned and left the room, stepping into the corridor where Lance was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, still seething. "They want us to keep it quiet," Bill said. Lance didn't look surprised. He scoffed and shook his head. "Of course they do. Sweep it under the rug. Call it a classified operation and pretend it never happened." Graves said they don't want mass panic. Said it's not the right time. Lance looked at him now, bitter amusement in his eyes. "Yeah. Not the right time. It never is it?" Bill didn't reply. Lance sighed and stood up straight, the fire dimming just a little. "Fine. I'll play along. For now. But don't think I'm just gonna forget what we saw. What we fought." Bill nodded. "Neither will I." The two stood in silence for a beat, comrades bound by something no one else would ever understand. Then they walked down the hall, side by side, into the uncertain shadows of what came next. Outside the facility, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pavement. Bill and Lance stood near the gate, the silence between them more comfortable now, familiar. Lance adjusted the strap of the duffel slung over his shoulder, glancing at the parking lot with a half smile. "So, what now?" he asked. "We just go back to pretending we're normal people." Bill shrugged. "Guess so. If you need anything, you know where to find me." Lance smirked. "Yeah. I'll swing by if I ever feel like drinking cheap beer and watching you fix that truck." Bill snorted. "There's nothing wrong with my truck. I just like working on it." "Sure," Lance said, already walking backward toward the lot. Then he added, more sincerely, "Take care of yourself, man." Bill gave him a nod. "You too." Lance turned and headed off, disappearing behind a row of cars. Bill lingered for a moment, then left on his own road. Chapter 16. Back at his garage, the familiar sounds of tools clinking and birds overhead filled the air, but they felt hollow somehow, distant. Bill stood beside the old truck, the hood still open just like he'd left it. He reached over to the battered cigar box sitting on the workbench, popped it open, and picked out a stubby cigar. He rolled it between his fingers, the motion automatic. Then, after a beat, he tossed it back in the box and closed the lid. He leaned against the truck, arms folded, staring up at the ceiling like he could find answers there. The war was over, but the fight wasn't. Not really. He had fought wars before, survived grueling battles, but it was different this time, it was life-changing. He couldn't stop thinking about Red Falcon. About what they'd found in those tunnels. About what might still be out there. The smell of motor oil filled the air. A breeze stirred the dust on the floor. Bill sighed. Somehow, turning wrenches didn't feel like enough anymore. The world had gone still. Bill sat in the cab of his old truck, the windows down, a warm breeze drifting in as the sun slowly set. Crickets chirped in the tall grass beyond the driveway. The moon hung low and full above the trees, bathing the garage in silver light. He leaned back in the cracked leather seat, boots propped up on the dash, arms folded behind his head. For the first time in what felt like ages, there was silence. No gunfire. No alarms. No tunnels full of shadows. Just peace. His eyes drifted shut, breath steadying as sleep finally took hold. The truck's radio, dark and silent, flickered faintly. A low crackle of static broke the night. Then another. The old unit blinked to life, dim green digits glowing on the faceplate. A warbled voice came through, twisted, mechanical. Words layered over each other, distorted beyond recognition. And then, something else. A second voice, alien, wet and garbled. Echoing as if from deep underwater. "Red Falcon, we are watching." Bill stirred slightly but didn't wake, his face peaceful in the moonlight. The radio blinked once more, then went dark. Somewhere, far away, something was watching, and always was.